On June 1st, 2012, the San Diego Police Department received a call requesting a wellness check. The call for the wellness check originated in the state of Washington. A woman called her local police department and told them that she had received an extremely disturbing phone call from one of her family members named Regina Johnson. The police department in the state of Washington contacted the San Diego, California Police Department and informed them of the information they received. After gathering the necessary information regarding the location of Regina's home and the occupants of that home, the San Diego Police Department executed the wellness check. At 1:35 a.m. on June 2nd, the San Diego Police Department arrived at a condominium located on the 7200 block of Navajo Road. They proceeded to Unit 237. After several minutes of knocking on the front door, the door finally opened. Regina Johnson opened the door and stood in the doorway, but she didn't say a word. The officer asked her if she was okay, but Regina did not respond. Instead, she walked away from the door, leaving it open. She sat on the couch, still without speaking a word. The officers describe her behavior in that moment as catatonic. They say she was in a daze. While Regina sat quietly on the couch, the officer decided to enter the residence and conduct a search. Still, Regina has not said a word. As the officer is walking through the condo, he discovers an adult male body lying face up on the floor, surrounded by blood. His body was lying in a hallway right outside of one of the bedrooms. It was immediately obvious that the man was dead. When the officer turned toward the doorway of the bedroom where the man was lying, he discovered a female body laying on the floor inside of the bedroom. It was also obvious that the female was deceased. The officer could tell that the bodies had been deceased for quite a while. This seemingly quiet home had become a house of horror. The male victim was Regina's husband. He was 56-year-old Reuben Johnson. The female victim was Reuben and Regina's daughter, 14-year-old Aaliyah Johnson. Regina was 55 years old. Reuben was originally from Lynchburg, Virginia. He spent 20 years in the U.S. Navy. Due to being in the Navy, Reuben was away from home very often. But whenever he was home, he was very involved in Aaliyah's academic activities. He made sure she stayed on top of her schoolwork. Reuben retired from the Navy in 2009 and found steady employment as a security guard. Aaliyah was a freshman at West Hills High School. She was a cheerleader, and she was described by the school's faculty as a good and vibrant student. Aaliyah had recently got her first boyfriend, and his name was Xavier Marshall. The officers who discovered the bodies of Reuben and Aaliyah were not sure what role Regina played in the murders. They weren't sure if Regina was a witness or the perpetrator. Regina continued to sit silently on the couch. Because she had not said anything and appeared to be in a daze, Regina was transported to the hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. The homicide detectives obtained a search warrant for the condo and they began to evaluate the crime scene. Reuben's body was found outside of his daughter's bedroom door. The detectives observed that Reuben was shot once in his torso and once in his head. There was a blood-spattered cell phone lying next to Reuben that was later determined to be his cell phone, and he also had his Bluetooth earpiece in his ear. There was a 9mm handgun on the floor next to his body. There was also a plate, a fork, some salad, and a half-eaten piece of pizza lying near him. Aaliyah's body was lying face down with a close-range gunshot to the back of her head. She was covered with a blanket. There was also a blood-spattered jar of Vaseline lying right next to her. The detectives discovered that there were no shell casings on the floor in the condo. They figured someone had to have picked them up. There was also a note written on the bathroom mirror in lipstick. The note appeared to be written to a doctor. A portion of the note said, "This is your fault. You told Reuben to give it to me anyways. 5 pills." The detectives began questioning the neighbors. Most of the neighbors said, from what they could see, Reuben and Regina had a very loving relationship, and that both Reuben and Regina adored their daughter. The detective asked the neighbor if they heard any arguing or any gunshots. The neighbors replied, no, they didn't hear anything. There was one neighbor who said she heard Reuben and Aaliyah arguing maybe 2 weeks ago about Aaliyah's boyfriend. According to the neighbor, Reuben had forbid Aaliyah from being in a relationship with a boy named Xavier, and he forced her to break up with him. At that point, the detectives were interested in speaking with Xavier. The detectives were able to get a hold of Xavier and spoke with him at the police station. The detectives asked Xavier if he'd been to Aaliyah's house in the last few days. Xavier replied no. He said Aaliyah's father didn't want him coming around. The detectives asked Xavier when was the last time he spoke to Aaliyah. He responded, it was about 2 weeks ago when she broke up with him. Xavier said Aaliyah told him that her dad didn't like how much attention she was giving him. He stated that Aaliyah didn't want to break up with him, but her dad forced her to do it. Xavier also said Aaliyah told him some other details about her home life. Xavier told the detectives that Aaliyah told him that her mom was acting strange. He said Aaliyah described her mom as depressed. He also said Aaliyah told him that her mom was always at home, in bed, and she cried a lot. Xavier said Aaliyah told him that she was kind of scared because her mom seemed suicidal. Xavier told the detectives that he himself once heard Regina say that she was going to kill Reuben. The detectives asked Xavier, why would she want to do that? And Xavier said he didn't know why Regina would want to do that. The detectives followed up with Xavier's parents, and they confirmed Xavier's story. The detectives didn't find anything questionable about Xavier's behavior, and they decided to clear him as a suspect. The detectives decided they needed to speak with Regina immediately, so they went to the hospital to get an official statement from Regina. According to the detectives, Regina had nothing nice to say about Reuben. She said that he was controlling and he was mean to Aaliyah. Regina stated that Reuben could not stand the thought of Aaliyah having a boyfriend, but that she was fine with Aaliyah having a boyfriend. Regina claims that on the morning of the murder, Reuben left home around 8 a.m. to go to a doctor's appointment. She said she decided to let Aaliyah sleep in because it was picture day, and she was allowed to go to school a little later on that particular day. Regina says that Aaliyah was still getting ready when Reuben arrived home unexpectedly. She says he wasn't supposed to be home until around 11 a.m., but he came home before 10. Regina said Reuben was surprised to find that Aaliyah had not left to go to school. Regina says Reuben became upset with Aaliyah, and Aaliyah and Reuben began to argue. Regina says she tried to calm the situation, but Reuben began directing his anger towards her. Regina says that while she and Reuben are engaged in a really big argument, Aaliyah ran out of the room and came back with a gun. She said Aaliyah was pointing the gun at Reuben. Regina said Reuben disarmed Aaliyah and intentionally shot her. Regina said Reuben dropped the gun. She said she then picked up the gun and shot him. She said she shot him first in the stomach and then shot him in the head. She said she shot him the second time because she was afraid he would attack her. Regina says she spent days inside of the condo with the bodies because it was hard for her to say goodbye. It has been reported that Regina spent 3 days in the home with the deceased bodies of Reuben and Aaliyah. She also expressed that at one point she covered her daughter's body with a blanket and she laid next to her. The detectives asked Regina about the half-eaten pizza and salad that was found on the floor next to Reuben. Regina explained that she prepared that food for Aaliyah, and during the confrontation, it got thrown on the floor. After the detectives spoke to Regina, they made contact with Reuben's sisters, Deborah and Denise. They asked them about Reuben's relationship with Aaliyah. Deborah and Denise both admitted that Reuben was strict, but he was not abusive. Deborah explained that Reuben was not a fan of how lenient Regina was with Aaliyah. Deborah said Reuben wasn't supportive of Aaliyah having a boyfriend. Deborah also said Reuben did not like the amount of time Aaliyah was spending with Xavier. And Reuben felt like Aaliyah was not focused on her schoolwork. She also said that Reuben told her that he was afraid that Xavier was becoming a distraction for Aaliyah. Deborah told the detectives that Regina had recently lost her job of 18 years. The family finances had become a big strain on Reuben and Regina's relationship. Deborah said that Regina was still spending money as if there had not been a huge shift in the household income. She said Regina's spending habits put another strain on an already tense relationship. Deborah said Reuben told her Regina was having mood swings, erratic behavior, and she developed a short temper. She was also distancing herself. Most of the time, Regina stayed home and in bed. Deborah said Reuben tried to get Regina professional help. Regina was once a very social and outgoing person. Regina and Aaliyah were often going on shopping sprees and routine trips to the nail shop, but lately, Regina was spending most of her time at home in bed. That put a strain on Regina's relationship with Aaliyah. Deborah said Reuben talked to her about wanting to get Regina on some sort of medication or possibly hospitalized because he had become very worried about her. Deborah said she felt things were getting worse and she actually suggested to her brother that he should move out. But Reuben told her he couldn't leave at that moment because Regina was sick. Eventually, Reuben was able to convince Regina to see a doctor. Regina was diagnosed with depression. Regina was prescribed medication and therapy. After Reuben and Aaliyah's bodies were transported, a gunshot residue test was performed on both of their hands. Neither Reuben nor Aaliyah tested positive for gunshot residue. There was no gunshot residue on either of their hands. There was also a gunshot residue test performed on Regina, and her test came back positive. Remember, Regina said Reuben shot Aaliyah. The detectives were able to access Reuben and Aaliyah's phone records. Those phone records showed that Aaliyah stopped using her cell phone around 8 a.m. on May 29th, and Reuben stopped using his cell phone around 11:30 a.m. on May 29th. That suggested to the detectives that Aaliyah died several hours before her father. While looking at Reuben's cell phone records, detectives decided to contact the last person Reuben spoke with. When detectives called the number, a female answered the phone. The woman says that she and Reuben are just friends. She said Reuben did not express to her that he was having any problems that morning. She said everything seemed to be fine and Reuben didn't sound upset. Reuben's friends said that while they were on the phone around 11:30 a.m., Reuben told her that he had left his doctor's appointment and he was going home to eat lunch. The detectives began to believe that the salad and the pizza that was laying on the floor near Reuben was the lunch he told his friend he was going home to eat. After speaking to multiple people and analyzing the physical and forensic evidence they had at that time, it was clear that Reuben was not the shooter. On June 2nd, 2012, the detectives decided to arrest Regina and charge her with the murder of Reuben and Aaliyah Johnson. Shortly after Regina's arrest, the detectives determined that the 9mm handgun found at the crime scene belonged to Reuben, and it was the gun that was used in the murders. The detectives also received the results of the fingerprints that were on the gun. Neither Reuben or Aaliyah's fingerprints were found on the gun. The only fingerprints that were found on the gun belonged to Regina. Regina's prints were found on the slide lock of the gun, the grip of the gun, and the magazine in the gun. The detectives felt that the presence of Regina's fingerprints on the magazine proved that Regina was the person who loaded the gun. The detectives also received the forensic report from the plate, fork, pizza, and salad that was found near Reuben. Reuben's DNA was found on the fork. That led the detectives to believe that was Reuben's salad and pizza lying near him, not Aaliyah's. In a preliminary hearing, Regina was found mentally incompetent to stand trial. Due to the circumstances surrounding her battle with depression, she was sent to a psychiatric hospital. When you are deemed incompetent to stand trial, you are evaluated periodically to see if your competency has returned. 5 years later, Regina was deemed competent to stand trial. Her trial began in September 2017. She was 60 years old. Regina entered a plea of not guilty, and during the trial, she testified on her behalf, and she told the courts the same story she told the detectives 5 years ago.
When I lost her, I lost everything. I lost.
Police say Johnson ambushed her daughter and husband Reuben in their condo in May 2012, shooting both of them and then writing this note in lipstick, saying in part, "This is your fault." But Johnson tells a different story, saying her husband shot their daughter in an argument over missing school.
He killed my daughter. I mean, that was his daughter too, but he killed her.
Johnson says she endured years of abuse and killed in self-defense.
When he put that gun down and I picked it up, I mean, I panicked and I was afraid. And I thought, if I don't pick this gun up right now, he might try to kill me. So I picked it up and I shot him.
Prosecutors argue Johnson struggled with severe paranoia and depression and was furious over her husband's infidelity, a notion Johnson left off.
If I was angry at Reuben and I wanted to shoot him because of the affairs he was having, I would have shot Reuben a long time ago.
And Johnson stayed in the house with the two bodies for 3 days. She has an explanation for that. We'll tell you what it is tonight at 7.
I would like to point out that in researching this case, I found several sources that said the date of the murders was May 30th, 2012, and others say the date of the murders was May 29th, 2012. According to the official court documents, the date of the murders was May 29th, 2012. Also, Reuben and Aaliyah's phone records show that the last date of use was the morning of May 29th. When the trial was over, the jury deliberated for 3 days. Regina was convicted of 2 counts of second-degree murder.
We will never really know what happened in that condo on May 29, 2012. There was only one person alive who really knows what happened. But one thing we do know for sure, Mrs. Johnson, is that the story you told the jury was not what happened. Physical evidence, fingerprints, the DNA, the gunshot residue, all the other physical evidence of the scene proved to the jury beyond a reasonable doubt that you were guilty of these 2 murders. And I know the difficulty that you have in living with that knowledge. The 12 members of the community found that you killed Aaliyah. And again, only you really know what happened. And we probably never will know the full story.
Judge, how can you say that? They never proved
Mrs.
anything.
Johnson,
Nobody ever said, they never even had a motive. Why?
Mrs.
Why? How
Johnson,
can you sit there and say that I killed my daughter? How? You have no, how can you say the things that you're saying? Because I wrote on the wall, I wrote on the mirror, this is all your fault. I didn't confess to killing anybody. I talked about the pills.
Mrs. Johnson,
Nicole, Miss Rooney, she's talking about Reuben was begging for his life. Was she there? Is there any record that says I said Reuben was begging for his life?
Johnson,
I mean, come
Mrs.
on,
Johnson,
John. You have never agreed to anything. Every time Mr. Bessie has ever said anything,
Mrs. Johnson,
you have always denied him the right to say anything. To say anything. How can you even sit there and say the evidence? What evidence? None of the evidence you're saying, no, it's not true.
Mrs. Johnson,
Judge, you are not a fair judge.
Okay.
You are not. You talk about the evidence. You don't even know what the evidence really was. None of that stuff she talked about was true. She talked about me waiting for Reuben to come home. They talked about Aaliyah not even being in the house that morning. That Aaliyah was somewhere in UTC.
Okay.
She was 14. How did you get to UTC?
Mr. Bessie,
He talked about me just standing over Reuben and shooting him. Reuben was standing up when I shot him. I shot him because he shot my daughter. That's not fair. What kind of judge is that?
Regina received a sentence of 80 years to life in prison. Regina has never stated that she shot her daughter, Aaliyah.